Hey everyone, my name is Eric Bahn. I'm one of the co-founders here at Hustle Fund, and welcome to today's session, which is called a workshop on pitch deck titles. So I'm sure that many of you have probably tried to go out and raise capital before, and I'm sure that you took great care in putting together what you thought was the perfect pitch deck, right? So the colors were perfect, all the pixels were top aligned, left aligned, right aligned, whatever. Imagery and graphics, they all looked amazing. And even your friend said that this was a deck that was super compelling. So then, when it was all done, you take a deep breath and fire off your deck to a VC that you've been excited to pitch, and you hit that send button, right? So on the other side of the email inbox, some VC jerk wearing sweatpants on his couch eating Chipotle receives your deck, looks at it for 30 seconds, makes a mental note to automatically reject you, and doesn't even bother to reply to your email. You may never hear from this person ever again. What happened? Well, it's complicated. I mean, a lot of things could have happened, but a common reason for a pitch deck failing in this scenario is actually something pretty simple. It's poor titles. And we're going to fix that today in this workshop, which I'm very excited about. So let's go ahead and take a look at the agenda. We're going to start off with who I am. Again, like I spend usually 2 seconds on that whenever you see these presentations from me. We're going to talk about the VC persona, which is something that we've covered in previous presentations, but is really important to highlight again when it comes to pitch deck, presentation, titles, construction. And then we're actually going to go into a real workshop where I've created a fake company. And then we're going to show you what poor headlines look like and actually do the work together while sort of outer monologue, the process of actually creating good headlines, good titles. I use headlines and titles synonymously in this. So if that's annoying, my apologies. And then of course, we'll leave plenty of time for Q&A. So for this Zoom webinar, I'm joined by my producer and our head of engineering product, Mike. He's going to be helping to field some of the Q&A questions that come in. So please direct them to the Q&A portion of this Zoom webinar, not the chat. But also please use the chat. I mean, it's a great opportunity for you to make fun of me, make fun of my garage, but also maybe even share a little bit about like where you're based right now, what are you working on? There's a very, very talented community of folks here. So it's nice to get to know each other. So we'll leave plenty of time for Q&A at the end. I'd like to talk for about 25 minutes on slide titles and then leave the remaining time on answering your questions about constructing great pitch decks and talking about titles as well. So before we get into the show, I wanted to just recognize the fact that we do not operate in an island here at Hustle Fund when it comes to these ongoing webinar series that we produce each month. We can only do this work because we have amazing partners. And I want to talk about NetSuite, who has been an incredible partner to us in the past year. So founders, take control of your business potential with NetSuite by Oracle, the world's #1 cloud-based business management suite. NetSuite is helping startups navigate the fundraising process with conviction by providing crucial financial visibility, pre-built reports, and industry-specific dashboards, all on the same unified platform. Not to mention, NetSuite's dedicated venture capital practice and extensive partner network provided a supportive infrastructure to help you manage everything from implementation to investor expectations once you secure funding. With NetSuite, enter your next pitch with confidence, knowing that you understand where your business is now and where it is headed. To learn more, visit netsuite.com. Here at Hustle Fund, we have 240 companies across our two portfolios, our two funds. Many of them are NetSuite clients and are very, very happy with the decision to stick with NetSuite. So definitely check out netsuite.com. Big shout to NetSuite for allowing this session to happen today. Alrighty then. So let's go ahead and move on to me. So I've raised a lot of money in my career. I've made every mistake that you can think of when it comes to constructing pitch decks, pitch deck titles, and so forth. And this is my atonement, right? Is my confessions and being able to hopefully teach you guys something to avoid all the mistakes I've made. So I love beginning pitch decks, actually a lot of things related to pitching, whether it's sales, raising money, whatever, by starting with personas. So I come from a product management background myself, and personas was something I was so grateful to be trained on early on, which is this idea of trying to build a characterization, maybe a typecast or stereotype of the ideal person that you're trying to serve. And in the case of product, building a product that initially serves the needs of that core persona whom you think would be your power user, right? Now, personas actually work really well when it comes to pitching. And I want to paint you a picture of the VC that you're going to be serving, right? So it's usually a dude. It's usually a white or Asian dude. It's changing, thankfully, but like I just want to like play stereotypes here. It's usually a white or Asian dude who has a possibly green or blue Patagonia vest, just like Jared from HBO's Silicon Valley here. You know, the Allbirds shoes, maybe now Adams, you know, goes to Burning Man whenever COVID's not around. Maybe takes vacations like silent retreats at Esalen down in Big Sur, you know, hangs out the Madeira bar and Sand Hill Road. I'm playing all these like very big inside joke, like extremely annoying stereotypes of VCs here. So only some of you might get this. And thankfully, we've moved on from that era into a new era of VC, which we can talk about in the Q&A too. But I want you to picture this person because a lot of times they come from a surprisingly narrow background, right? They went to top schools. A lot of them come from banking. A lot of them come from consulting. And fun fact, I was actually hired originally out of college into a top consulting company, and I got fired after 3 months because they realized I was terrible. But I got through the analyst training program, and the top thing that I learned about pitch decks, which is pretty much all that I was going to be doing as a consultant, was like designing these decks, these 100-page decks for these CEOs of Fortune 500 companies to present strategies to boards and so forth. The number one rule that they taught me was that no one was going to read your deck at all. So all those fancy charts, data that you're putting together, they're not going to read it at all. But you need to make the deck as skimmable as possible. And this usually relates to titles, so that you can just skim through a 100-page deck as quickly as possible as a consultant to these CEOs. And then those who are reading can capture most of the value without looking at any of the slides' content deeply, right? So why are we talking about this personas, and why am I telling you this story? Well, you know, I'm an amateur cognitive scientist, right? I really got into psychology and cognitive science late in life. I'm not trained in this at all. So there might be folks actually who are trained in this field in the community right now that can chat about this to confirm or deny anything I'm about to say here. But there's a simple principle that in nature that I think really applies, which is like begets like, meaning people who are similar to you are naturally attracted to one another. So if I learned that, I know that Mike is from Boston, like he's a huge, like, let's pretend he's like a huge Boston Red Sox fan. And that's, by the way, a very triggering team I'm picking. So apologies to New Yorkers and all that out there. But let's say I'm a huge Boston Red Sox fan too, right? Like if we identify that quickly, then, you know, we actually have like something common to bond over. And there's a good likelihood that at least we can carry a conversation and possibly form a friendship from that basis. You know, if you present a deck that looks very similar, or at least has some of the principles applied to what analysts in the at Boston Consulting Group, McKinsey, Goldman Sachs were trained to design and conditioned to design, like I was as an early analyst, then that is sort of like begets like. You know, it's sort of just like, I'm like you. You know, it's a bit of like an implied messaging of just like, this is something that you're quite familiar with, even just on a formatting basis. So, you know, pay attention. So this is my theory, but I think it does work, and it produces incremental gain in terms of conversion to checks over time. And sometimes it's all about those increments and optimizations that allow you to capture and fill out the rest of your round. All right, so that's about the persona. We can talk more about personas a little bit later. Let's talk, though, about the elements of a great pitch deck. So there's a few things to understand about a great pitch deck. So here are like the 5 laws that I believe that everyone should follow. Again, assume no one is going to read your deck truly. So I know there's occasionally I see like these decks that are super duper text heavy. It's just like the founders are trying to produce this standalone product, this deck that could be passed around, provides 100% context about the entire nuance of the business, all this tiny text, disclaimers, data. I mean, if you think about that persona of the VC who's maybe seeing like dozens of these things every day, and maybe even like earmarking like an hour at the end of the day after taking a bunch of meetings in like, the sweatpants now are kind of like gross from like the Chipotle stains and all that stuff. This is a person that's just going to be trying to fly through and just like do yes, no, yes, no, yes, no flags on those whom he or she wants to follow up with. So if you're going to present like something that takes 40 minutes to read, that's like a real bummer because humans are naturally lazy. Maybe I'm just projecting too much of myself, right? So don't assume that people will want to read a deep deck, right? That's part one. Related to this is like the slide titles. So the thing that people naturally do in these kinds of decks is just look at the biggest text and then try to grok what's happening just from the biggest text. It just so happens that the biggest text on your pitch deck are going to be generally your slide titles, right? So let's keep that in mind. And this is really the crux of this entire webinar today, this workshop. So part three, though, is where it starts to get a little bit less obvious, which is each slide title should be a full sentence. Okay, I'm very, very biased towards this treatment. Now you can discard all this, everything that you're hearing if you totally allergically disagree, but like I very, very strongly believe that if you can concisely summarize what you're trying to say in one brief sentence, possibly two, but ideally one sentence for the slide, that is the gold standard. And that's what we're going to do today. And then any data or like other information that you want to show, graphs, charts, etc., should just essentially augment what that title says. It's very simple. It's a very simple principle. So the title is the most important thing. It's a sentence, and then any information below that is just a pure augmentation of that, right? So if I'm claiming like the market that I'm serving is $5 trillion, right? It's crazy, right? But then you present like here's like the OECD data and like, Fed data, blah, 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 that supports this fact. Then, okay, I'm like, all right, I'm not going to read that, but it looks credible from credible sources. So I believe this slide. Let's move on. The next rule, I guess like the fourth here, is that when you read just the sentences back to back of the slide titles that you've created into sentences, when you read those one after the other, it should form a complete paragraph that is cohesive, it's continuous to one another, and communicates, I think, the fifth rule, which is now you have armed your reader with 70% of everything that they need to know to understand your business, enough to actually even possibly make a decision as to proceed to the next step, whether it's an investment, which is usually unlikely, or at least following up to talk to this person to get more of the nuances, get the real full pitch to understand the state of the business. So those are the 5 rules. A lot of founders sometimes hesitate and say like, well, I just want to reveal as little as possible and, get to the meeting where I can actually just like control the narrative at that point. I understand and empathize with that sentiment, but I think it's very unrealistic. So even if like you were able to get to a full pitch with like a partner, what often happens is, that partner is just going to share around that deck to everyone on his team or her team to try to get some different perspectives, right? So more people are going to view your assets without any context of your own vocalized narration than those who will actually be able to hear your vocalized narration, if that makes sense, because they're just going to send around your Docsend link or just PDF it, share around your PDF, and people are going to make judgments and decisions based on just the deck. And again, like if it's a very text heavy where I have to read, like bummer. Or if it's like, I guess too polarized the other direction, it's like it's not revealing enough because you really care about like your vocal narration in a real pitch. It's not gonna be sufficient enough to make a decision. So this is where the art of pitch deck headlines actually matters. Okay, so let's keep these rules in the back of our minds. And again, this is all being recorded, so you can go back and copy and paste this and add it to your desktop screensaver later if you're so inclined. But I think sometimes instead of saying things, we should show things, right? So let's go ahead and walk through a fake example. So I'm going to go ahead and move to this tab, which is a fake scenario that I put up. So here is the prompt of the company that of the pitch deck headlines that we're trying to titles that we're trying to create. So I'm a parent of some young kids. Fortunately, they're not infants anymore. Thank goodness. They pee and poop on their own, and it's world life changing, all that stuff. But I do remember when I was a parent of infants, and I was freaked out about sudden infant death syndrome. This is called SIDS. So SIDS is essentially like when your child asphyxiates in their sleep, and then the parent walks in the next morning, they're like, "Oh my gosh, like what just happened?" Right? Like it's freaky, and it's a top fear for a lot of new parents, especially. Usually what happens in this case is like a infant will sadly roll over and he or she can't like roll back. And that's where the problems start. So let's pretend that you're the founder or co-founder of this infant wearables device. It's a sock or a wristlet or something that you can put onto an infant while she's sleeping. And, it'll hit alarm or present some sort of monitor, like, vital signs, that parents can track while the infant's sleeping and maybe be woken up if something is happening in terms of breathing problems. So it's a wearable device. Okay. Let's pretend that your team has extreme experience in like wearables and hardware and all that stuff, and that there's even some traction. The example that I like to use is, let's say that you did a crowdfunding campaign and it actually showed some pretty serious results. Okay. Let me walk you through some of the most common headlines I see for this business or any startup, frankly. And it is as follows. Well, I can leave this up like this. Team, problem, solution, market, traction. By far, these are the most common slide titles that I see in a pitch deck. Do you see a problem here? All right, again, like let's come back to like I'm in my sweatpants, got my Chipotle in front of me. I love Chipotle, by the way, so I keep shilling Chipotle. And I'm trying to just like, I'm tired. It's like 7:38 p.m. and like, I just want to watch Netflix. But I gotta like roll through these next 20 pitch decks that just hit my inbox. And I'm like, okay, what's this company? All right, whatever. Okay, team, problem, solution, market, traction. What the hell is this thing? Right? Like, right? Like it gives you nothing, right? Like I can't scan this, and you're forcing me to read. How dare you? You're forcing me to actually do VC work. What the? Like, I'm so offended. Right. So, this is like I think whatever. I'll just move on here. So anyway, like these are examples of really bad slide titles. So let's try to see whether we can fix this. And this is the exercise that we're going to do. So what I'm going to do now is just based on this prompt that you see, the setup, let's go ahead and try to design better slide headlines. So in this scenario, I want to only produce really 5 slides. What I think is the best practice when it comes to creating assets for your fundraise is to have both a teaser, like actually 3 things, a blurb, which is a forwardable, very, very quick summary of like some of the sexiest aspects of your business that can be forwardable very easily by your friends, other investors, to make warm introductions to anyone else. I think that's a really critical first asset to create, which is just around the blurb. And we've had past workshops on this before that you can check on at the Hustle Fund YouTube channel to look those up. A second asset that I think is very important is, let's start actually with like the other end of it, which is like your full presentation deck. So that could be actually pretty long, 20 slides or more, or whatever, that presents like the longer, more nuanced case of like why your team, why your business and is compelling to invest in, right? And what I want to focus on was the teaser deck, which kind of sits between the blurb and the long deck, which is often like an asset that is appended as part of your blurb when you're forwarding this along, which just shows you like the 5 basic elements of any good seed deck. So one more setup here is, let's pretend that this is a seed fundraise. We're a seed fund, so that's kind of where I spend a lot of my time, not a Series A or B thing. So for any good seed deck, pitch deck, there's only really 5 elements that you need to make the case for to try to garner investment. It is team, problem, solution, market, and traction. So you basically need only just like 5 slides, right? And this is going to be like part of the blurb, ideally, and the email. You click on the Docsend link, it pulls up. It's like, oh, okay, I got like a better flavor for this. And the goal that you want to have with a good teaser deck and blurb is not an investment decision, but just the VC typing back saying, hey, let's meet up. Right, that's it. Like a chance for you to make your full pitch. Okay, so let's do this. Now you don't have to obviously do things in this order. So I'm going to kind of rearrange some of these elements here, but let's try to do this in real time. So first comes, I'm going to start with a problem. And I'm going to make up this data, right? Instead of just saying problem, let's go with like every year. Wait, let's see if we can type even. Okay, here we go. Every year, 100, let's make it a little bit less somber, like 37,000 infants die in their sleep due to SIDS, and it's completely preventable, right? So that's the problem statement, which is like a lot of dead babies. Wow, that's terrible. And I don't want to be flippant about this, actually. Like this really did freak me out as a young parent, and I'm sure many of you out there too. The second thing too is this. Okay, so we went into like a problem statement here. Let's just like mark this as problem. All right. I like to jump into the market here, right? Which is like, we are experiencing a baby boom right now. And this year alone, like 2.3 million new parents will have their first baby. And everyone is fearful about SIDS. This one might be a little bit long. Let's see if we can actually try to shorten this a little bit. So again, like this has to be scannable and needs to fit ideally within 2 lines on the headline of a slide, right? So maybe we cut out the baby boom, or we shorten baby boom. We are in a baby boom, like a massive baby boom. This year alone, 2.3 million parents will have their first baby, and everyone is fearful about SIDS. Okay. So now we're starting to show that like there's something bigger here. Maybe below this too, on this slide on market, I would include things like statistics on baby boom in the US, Asia, elsewhere, try to maybe like triangulate that into like a total addressable market size of like billions of dollars and so forth. So this is market. Let's go with a solution next, okay? Which is we have created a simple wearable sock that monitors the vitals of infants and alerts parents if there is a problem during sleep. Can't get any more straightforward than that, right? A cute little sock that you put on a cute little foot and alerts happen, right? So this is the solution slide. Let's go with traction next. And I'm going to totally make this up, right? Like last month, we did a crowd, we trialed a crowdfunding campaign that generated 2,700 pre-orders of our product before it's ready for market. Oh my goodness, right? That's pretty good. That's traction. Now, traction, by the way, is the one that we're the most forgiving about at Hustle Fund, and a lot of pre-seed funds are the same. A lot of times you have only maybe the concept or prototype already built out, maybe 1 or 2 pilots, or a handful of traction. So if you don't have this yet, there's ways that it's usually the least important, I think, at the pre-seed stage at least, possibly seed stage too. All right, let's finally end with the team slide, right? Which is, I'm going to totally make this up. Like we are veteran builders in hardware and wearables represent with over 10 years working at Nike and Under Armour for well, yeah. Well, 10 years working at Nike and Under Armour, and like we hold like 2 PhDs in like mechanical engineering or something. Or whatever, let's just hold like this. This one I feel a little bit less good about. Maybe, this sometimes like these kinds of like team flexes are a little bit strange. Like one is just like specifically the thing that I don't really love is like I occasionally see something like we have like 37 years combined of experience. It's a little weird to see those. Like I'm really personally like whatever, right? Like, but like on occasion it is relevant here. Okay, so this is the team slide. This is the one where I want to maybe like tweak this a little bit more because it is frankly the most important slide. Now, if you've ever viewed some of our past presentations on pitching, I generally like to see the team slide in the very beginning. But sometimes from a narratives perspective, when you're actually trying to construct something that is like a full paragraph, it just makes sense to put it in a different spot of your presentation. That's totally fine. All right. So I think that's good enough. So let's, again, like go back to this setup. And by the way, I only have maybe like 2 or 3 more minutes of talking before we get to the open Q&A here. So again, if you have questions, please put those in the Q&A box and we'll get to them soon. So we're talking about this wearables company that is focusing on preventing SIDS, right? We went from slides that said team, problem, solution, market, and traction. We understand the persona of the VC is this tired VC, large, probably a dude. Again, the demographics are changing, fortunately. Wearing sweatpants in COVID, hasn't laundered himself in a while, pizza boxes and Chipotle and, $100 bottles of wine too. 7:37 p.m. And I'm trying to actually just like, blow through the decks that are in my inbox so I can just enjoy the rest of my evening and watch whatever relevant Netflix show is on right now. So how does this read? Does it read as a sentence? Yes. Is this when we read them together, does it complete a full paragraph or 70% of what you need to know is here? Let's find out. So I'm going to read it to you. Every year, 37,000 infants die in their sleep due to SIDS, and it's completely preventable. We're in a massive baby boom. This year alone, 2.3 million new parents will have their first baby, and everyone is fearful of SIDS. We have created a simple wearable sock that monitors the vitals of infants, and it alerts parents if there's a problem during sleep. Last month alone, we trialed a crowdfunding campaign that generated 2,700 pre-orders of our product before it's even ready for the market. We are veteran builders in hardware and wearables with over 10 years working at Nike and Under Armour. We hold 2 PhDs. Okay, that feels pretty good. I think I have a pretty decent sense of team, problem, solution, market, and traction. For me in my sweatpants, like it might be interesting enough for me to hear a reply saying like, let's meet up, right? 3 words, let's meet up. That's it. And then you can take it from there and hopefully present your full pitch deck, which again, will conform to some of these rules that we've mentioned. And so you'll have a great pitch, and then you'll have a full context slide that's easy to scan, but also full of nuance for that full presentation. And you're ready to start collecting term sheets or safes or whatever you need. Okay, so I tried to speak for about 25 minutes or so. We actually have about 30 minutes left here, and I'm sure that many of you have questions. So I want to invite back my colleague, Mike. Mike, I'm not sure if you've been tracking the Q&A. Is there anything interesting popping up? Any good questions that you're seeing here that we can begin to address?
Yeah, we got a couple good ones. Why don't we start on a little softball? Should people send decks as PDFs or PPTs?
Neither. So here, let me stop my screen here because I want to just like talk like normal people. So the question, like, should you send the decks as PDFs or PPTs? The answer is do not do either. Actually send it as a Docsend link. So Docsend is a tool that allows you to share a link to allow people to view your presentation, but it has a couple of very interesting features. If you choose to update your deck over time, the latest version can be uploaded on that same URL so that you're always presenting the latest information. That's part one. Part two, it's a wonderful stalking tool. So put an email requirement behind the viewing of the deck, and you can actually see that Eric actually spent 2 minutes 55 seconds on the slides, or he spent a lot of time on the team slide or another slide, or he's reviewing the deck 5 times a day. It's a really, really great analytics tool. So I think it's worth shelling out the couple bucks. It's probably less than $50 a month or something, but well worth it, especially during your fundraise, to use Docsend.
All right, so let's dig into the actual content. We have a great question from Evan. Should you include something like a mission or a purpose slide? A few other people are wondering as well at the top.
Yeah, I think so. So, I'm actually not terribly biased either way, but it is sometimes helpful if it really does set a good kind of tone or summary that can be done in a very pithy way. Yeah, no problem. But just have like a litmus test of, can this be read in about 2 seconds where people can move on, right? And also, I guess the other litmus test to really fall back on is knowing the persona that you're trying to serve and knowing that the desired outcome is to get a meeting so that you can get to your full pitch, or possibly if you're past that phase, to get the money. What does that mission statement slide actually do towards that aim? Most of the times, I think it's actually just a distraction, but sometimes it is important for folks to see. So I guess I'm not against it, but just conform to the same kind of rule. Don't put your mission statement into like, these are the 27 pillars, of why we think we need to do this work. I'm like, I'm not gonna read any of this stuff, right? If it's like one simple statement that like just really wraps up the entire thing, that's awesome. I'll tell you like the mission statement Hustle Fund. It's sort of a mission statement, but it's more of like a mantra that drives us, that we communicate, which is that great hustlers look like anyone and come from anywhere. That's something that we try to work into our pitch every time. Great hustlers look like anyone and come from anywhere. And I think it speaks to our mission and kind of like sets the right kind of tone of what we're all about at Hustle Fund. So if you have something like that, I think that can really work.
Great. A lot of people are wondering about visuals. Should you put memes in your deck? Should you put big pictures? Should you stay away from pictures? What do you think, Eric?
When I read to my kids every night before bed, I find actually myself really loving picture books again, right? Because it's just lazy. It like paints like more nuances of the text that's being read. I think that we all love a good picture book. So I'm a big fan of visuals. I'll give you an example of like some things that we do. So there's like, there's the cliche that picture tells 1,000 words. I'm just thinking about actually 2 slides in my own pitch deck at Hustle Fund. One is like, we wanted to produce this like one slide that was around social proofing to show that like we're kind of a big deal, right? So I put up like a big collage picture that said, that actually has a headline like, you may have seen us in press or in an event. And it's like us on stage at TechCrunch, us on stage at like Milken Conference, like all these other kind of big events. We're not saying where we are, but like it just looks like us like presenting intelligence to like a large crowd. So it's like a very strong signal. That's one side that I think is really exciting in our own pitch deck at Hustle Fund. Another example is this, which is, one thing that's a little bit unusual about our fund is like the volume of deals that we've seen. We've reviewed 30,000 deals in our careers across our team. So like there's one slide that's literally a giant 30,000. It's just like the number, like it tries to fill the entire width and height. It just says 30,000 to make a big point of like, look at us. We've seen so many deals, right? We have good things that we've been able to learn through repetition. So playing with huge font text on things that you really want to highlight or really nice visuals is great. And I think maybe more tactically are charts. So if you do have traction, like some sort of impressive growth and revenue, you have to have a month-over-month growth chart, or at least quarter-over-quarter growth chart that shows that kind of exponential trajectory. That says a lot about businesses, and it's like one of the best ways of FOMOing in VCs who are like so thirsty for that hockey stick like growth.
Very cool. Let's backtrack a little bit to the previous question about the beginning of the deck. A lot of people have questions here. A few people are wondering, is it a good idea to have kind of a summary? So it's like we're solving SIDS for tons of babies. We're super experienced. The Hustle Fund is leading our round. Should I put that all in one slide at the top?
That's a really interesting one. So I almost feel like that goes at the very end sometimes. Like I really like, so I sort of talked about the bias around, like, I really like starting with team sites in most cases. Again, it doesn't have to be a hard, fast rule, but it really also depends on, I think, the stage of the business. So if you're focusing on early stage pitch decks or pitching, like Hustle Fund, which focuses on pre-seed stage investing, these are essentially angel rounds where mom and dad, uncle and aunt are investing in you, and then hopefully Hustle Fund. It's really mostly about the team. It's like 70% about the team. It's just like, if everything else is okay, but like the team is insanely good, then I'll make the bet. Right. So I almost want to like just jump right into it and talk about like the most interesting part of the business up front. And then the slide that you're kind of suggesting, or at least was suggested by the person asking that question, almost feels like a good wrapper slide, which is like, so in summary, it could be things like, we're raising $500,000, $400,000 of it's committed. We're going after this problem, like Hustle Fund's participating. You can maybe find like 5 sort of things that can generate some of that like final FOMO. That's actually, I think, a really effectively, I'd almost like put it in the back. But in some cases, I've seen teams do that in the beginning, saying like, look, there's only $100,000 left. You have to act fast. And that kind of works too. Although I don't know. It's sometimes I feel that's like a little bit tactless, but it's, you got to hustle sometimes and just do what you need to do there.
So as long as we're talking about tactics, Patrick and a few other people want to know, like, should I just have the one deck? Should I have like a teaser deck and a super detailed deck and use both?
Yeah. So I think you should construct a great long deck. I think once you create that great long deck, you can generally slice it down to like 5 to 7 slides that can serve as your teaser deck. This is actually what I do with my own pitch deck. So at Hustle Fund, they call me the captain. We have like sort of domain captains in our team, and I'm the fundraising captain. So I lead most of the fundraising at our fund. So that's my process: is I'll create the long deck and then I'll cut the teaser deck from it later on. And it's super easy as a process. It'll take like 15 minutes to do that. That said, we had a presentation on fundraising and pitching and closing on Zoom from about a month ago that you can find on the Hustle Fund YouTube if you just search for Hustle Fund. And the case that I make is, I encourage you to not pitch with any deck once you get in front of these people. Okay. So let me give you a sense of what the arc actually looks like. It's like you create a blurb and a nice teaser deck to send to VC Mike. Mike's like, okay, this looks cool. Let's meet up. You meet up with Mike and possibly some of his teammates, and you give your pitch, but you don't use your deck at all. I would say, like, let's just talk like human beings here. And can I just like have a conversation with you about what we're up to? And I want to hear about your values. It evens out the power dynamics when you just like suggest that. Almost everyone will say yes. Like, you can forget the deck because we're all deck jaded. And then after you give your pitch, which by the way will be mutable, the benefit of Zoom or doing this kind of method of pitching, even in person, is that you can view the faces of the people in the room and try to adjust on the fly. So if it's like, Mike seems to be super excited about the technical aspects of like the hardware thing I'm building, let me actually spend more time on that than I was expecting, because it seems to be hitting the right kind of chord. Or maybe he's really interested on some other aspect of the business, like the go-to-market strategy, and you can just hit on that chord more. You can sort of adjust on the fly and call those audibles based on what you see in the pitch meeting. And then 1 minute after that presentation is done, you conclude the meeting, fire off your full deck and data room assets, whatever it is that you've prepared but you have not presented, to Mike, right? And I actually think that is like the perfect pitch. Come in with like your blurb and teaser deck, talk like a regular human being just like this with no deck, and then fire off the full context deck right after. That's the way that we pitch at Hustle Fund. That's what we try to coach all of our founders to do, and we think it is highly effective.
Very interesting. So let's jump into the content. And this is, I think folks would like a little bit of clarification about how and where to use the sentences and the sentence structure that you mentioned. So if you put sentences at the top of each slide, what do you put into the slide itself? Exactly how detailed should those sentences be? Can you talk a little bit more about this and how you recommend people make those title sentences?
Yeah, great. Let's talk about the tactics here. So I kind of did it in my own little presentation here, right? Like, let's talk about who you're actually pitching, right? So let's actually just let's modify this right now in real time. Let me make a copy of this slide because I do want to have it as a real asset later. So let's start with this one. Every year, 37,000 infants die in their sleep due to SIDS. Okay. So I'm gonna do this. Oops. Let me try to copy this a little bit differently and actually show you like what this is going to look like. So, okay, we'll just work with this. So every year, 37,000 people or infants die in their sleep due to SLIDs. Let me try to escape from presentation mode here so I can format this a little bit bigger. So it's important to actually have like large enough text that people can scan and read pretty well. So I like to do this kind of treatment. My rule is that if it fits on 2 lines, it's good to go. All right. So this fits on 2 lines. There's certain things I like to do that are little like tricks. Like I'll bold like certain aspects that I think are very, very important to hit. Sometimes I'll actually add like colors. So I'll use the Hustle Fund yellow here. And that's a slide headline right there, right? Pretty easy to scan, looks good. It's like in a nice position at the very top. In terms of this thing here, what I would probably do is then like kind of try to find some data. Let's try to do some real time. So sudden infant death rate by year, right? So maybe there's like a chart by the CDC. Perhaps I can actually go to Google Images here and let's just like use this one. Okay, so can I just like copy the image here? I can copy the image. Boom, right? Boom, we're here. We're done. So it doesn't say 37,000 deaths or whatever. Oh, wait, but it's very close. No, it's not. Okay, never mind. Anyway, so this gives you a sense of like what a good slide would look like. And then you can add like this is from the Center for Disease Control as of 2018 or whatever. Right? So the good news, by the way, is like it seems like they've cut this down by 80% since when I was born. So thank goodness for parents out there, and try not to worry about this issue too much. But this hopefully gives you like a more tactical sense of how I would think about constructing a slide. It's like I put the slide title here. It's very readable. I might highlight a couple things like this, use color treatments to make it more interesting. And then you can see that the data that comes from a credible source just augments the slide title. So you're done. Let's move on to the next slide and so forth. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more color around like what we're talking about and how you would tactically then place each of these concepts into a slide.
That's helpful, Eric. I want to jump to an excellent question from Christina and put the question from Dion into that as part B as well. So your deck might get sent around without any context. Because of that, should you put team first to make an intro? And should you put an ask for what you're looking for at some point into the deck?
Awesome. By the way, hi, Christina. I know you. You're an insanely amazing operator. So thank you for spending your time this morning. Yeah, you've nailed it. And you've probably seen this actually directly, Christina, since you've been in this game for a while. That's absolutely correct. Your deck is going to be passed around like all over the place. Right. And actually, there's some strange etiquette things that you're going to notice, too. Sometimes VCs also share it with other VCs without your permission. It's like really, really rude to do that without permission. Anyway, I can rail forever about how there's bad etiquette in this industry. But assume your deck will be forwarded around. Assume more people are going to see it without any context or narration from you. Okay, that I think is like a very important way to think about like the design of this. And that's why making these headlines are even more important, so that, again, 70% of what you need to communicate can be just scanned in the headlines alone. And for those who just see your presentation cold, they can try to make a judgment, a relatively informed judgment about whether they want to try to reach out to you to talk about investment and so forth. So putting the team in the beginning, again, especially at the seed stages or early stages of your company's development, I think is very important because it's really an investment about the team, right? Maybe a little bit later on when you're seeing like a Series D deck, perhaps it's more about like the traction service. It's like, well, like I got this 5-year trailing EBITDA that's moving up and to the right. We're now at like net profitability, and the cost per acquisition is consistently low. It's a bit more of a spreadsheet exercise. Team is still, of course, critical. People want to see who's the leadership. Hopefully, Christine is on it, and then that's it. And then the ask, I think, is good. So I am a little bit mixed about it. I do think having a clear ask is very helpful for a VC. It's like, we're trying to raise $500,000, maybe on these terms. I'll talk about that in a second. And here's the email, or here's how to reach me. So if like you at least present the call to action, which is like, send me an email, and your email is showing on every single slide in the bottom, but also in the final slide in fixed rate. This is where it gets a little bit more crazy. So sometimes you want to preserve a bit of optionality, right? So maybe you find Mike wants to raise $500,000, but he's generated so much FOMO, and the terms that are being presented to him are so compelling that he thinks he can go to now like $1.5 million, right? So it might be a little bit weird to just like plant your flag on the ground I just only want $500,000, and maybe it's the right thing to do sometimes, and it's a nice clear ask, and instead just preserve optionality. I definitely would not recommend putting like the valuation that you're seeking as an ask as well, because you want that to be somewhat mutable. Like for me as a VC, it's great to see. I'm like, awesome. Mike wants 6 million. I'm gonna offer him 3 million or something. it could it sort of, but you're setting you're anchoring yourself, right, unnecessarily, and maybe not giving your time for the market to actually price you. So I think it's a really good idea, like this ask, which is like, we're raising capital right now, but in some cases you may want to preserve a little bit of optionality if you think you can do it. So yeah, that's kind of like my very nebulous view on asks. The very clear thing though, I think as a takeaway, is at least having your email, like a call to action, like reach out to me and we can step some more time. Name, email, phone number, include that as the last slide. Is not a bad touch. But at the very least, add your email, like how people can contact you, as like a footer part of every slide, right? As well as maybe a disclaimer of like confidential, do not share, even though it will be shared. It at least is like hopefully something that gives people pause to make sure that you can control the distribution.
We've got a little tactical follow-up on the same topic. So if you're using Docsend to send around the deck, should you require people to put in an email before reading it?
Oh, yes, you should. Heck yes. Always require people to put in an email. Now, some people put in fake emails, whatever. Most people, though, are pretty good about putting in their real emails, because you want to capture those analytics. Like if I see that Mike, you want to see that like Mike is like logging in like 5 times a day to check your deck, and that's just really good stalking, and in some ways presents some data too. Like, so if someone's trying to play a game, like Mike is trying to do like radio silence on you to try to just make you squirm a little bit, but you notice that he's opening your Docsend like 15 times a day, you basically can call it bullshit because like he's really interested in some capacity, right? So I think that's great. The second thing though is just be aware that like Docsend isn't perfect protection either. It's pretty decent, but there's now like Chrome extensions specifically to scrape Docsends to turn them into PDFs. So just still assume that versions of your deck will be shared, which is a reason why like you still want to be very intentional about the slide titles and making sure that it still has a good standalone product in itself, and that more people will see. Beyond those who view your Docsend, probably it's likely that others beyond that will also see it in some fashion too.
Excellent. Mark just asked a funny question, and I think we should go to it. When a VC tells you, okay, cool, let's meet up, what does that mean as a result of seeing your deck?
Well, hopefully that means like we're going to jump on a Zoom call or actually meet in person post-COVID, right? So that's all you want. Again, like this is like, think of this as progressive discovery, right? When I just celebrated 18 years with my wife, dating this weekend, right? And I thought a lot that weekend about my first date with my wife. We went to get pho, that Vietnamese bowl of noodles for like $4. And I was really nervous. It was wonderful. And on that first date, we were just talking about pleasantries, right? I wasn't like going into like our history, my family's history of like mental health issues and cancer and like the strange mold I'm worried about in my neck or whatever. Like you don't go into those kinds of details on the first date, right? You kind of talk of. My dad actually gave me this advice. He said, "Oh, he literally before college, he says, Eric, when you go on like a date with someone, speak only of pleasantries in your first dates." I was like, this is freaking awesome advice. Thank you. That's what I did. And then later in subsequent meetings, that's when we like aired all the dirty laundry, and now she accepts me for who I am. So there's a little bit of that going on here too, which is like the blurb is not trying to be comprehensive. You're just only talking about the one or two things that are most interesting and compelling about your business, and includes a teaser deck. The teaser deck includes a really nice 5-slide summary, 7-slide summary of what you guys do that gives you a holistic sense, not perfect, of like what's going on. And then there's a full deck and your full pitch, which provides all the nuance, right? So I do think that having progressive discovery in that order and getting people into sunk cost of just like, wow, like now Mike has invested like 7 hours into us. It does have like a psychological effect of like the more time you get people sucked in, starting with pleasantries and then now getting really, really deep into nuance because you got them into like a higher order neocortex cognitive level, there's higher and higher likelihood that you're going to get money from them. So some thoughts there. And I know that's a bizarre answer.
No, I think that was helpful. And let's actually jump right into dirty laundry next, since you mentioned it. So let's say that in one of the 5 key areas that you outlined for pre-seed companies, somebody is not as strong. Do they reflect it right in that top sentence? Do they change the order of things in the deck? How should they address it? Perhaps there's not as much traction, not as much founder
Yeah.
experience.
No, I don't think that actually your pitch deck is a good place, at least the blurb and teaser deck part of airing like dirty laundry yet, right? Even like with a full deck, I think it's good to always like identify risks, right? So like the best founders that I work with are those who are really self-aware and confident, and showing like, here's where we have advantage and here's where we have problems. But like also here's like how we're trying to overcome those problems, right? Like like in our relationship as VC to founder, it's really awesome if we could just be completely authentic with each other and just like, you know, be aligned and trying to solve these things together, right? The good and the bad. So I think it is important to identify, but I don't, there's a way to deliver the news, right? You don't really just like have a headline that says like, now the big problem is that Mike is not legally able to work in the United States, right? So at some point he has to go back to Antarctica, where he's from, right? Or it's going to cost us like $70,000 to resolve his visa issues. Like, I don't know if that needs to be said right now. I mean, like that sounds very solvable. There might be creative solutions we're not even thinking about behind this. So, like, but like having like something that's like meaningful risk, right? Which is like, you know, this is why we're bullish on the market, but these are actually like some like the perceived risks. Like that could be like appendix slide. It could be something that is frankly better to just raise vocally, right? I'll give you an example of this. So, and this actually turns out to be like one way that we win deals. So this is telling a little bit of of the secret sauce behind Hustle Fund, which is like, you know, Mike pitches us and then we love what he wants to do, but we think it's going to be kind of competitive. So what I like to say is like, here are the reasons why this is like why our engagement is going to be really fruitful at Hustle Fund, but also here are the reasons why you shouldn't take our money, right? Like we start with generally a really small $25,000 check because we want to be able to get to know each other first. And we have this process where we work together on growth projects for 48 weeks, you know, where we can execute alongside each other to get really, really comfortable. To be honest with you, there's probably cheaper ways of getting $25,000 from other angels and so forth than Hustle Fund, right? Like I kind of like rattle off like these things, but generally the sentiment after that is just like, well, you're really upfront about it. Like I have very clear expectations of what I'm getting myself into. And generally founders find that refreshing. So I do think that it's good to just be self-aware. If it's like a really, really strong risk to the business, it's good to find a way of weaving it in. Ideally, it's through your own narration where you can introduce it versus something that could be completely misconstrued on like a slide title. Very nuanced though. So it's a great question.
It makes a lot of sense. So I think to close it out, we'll throw it over to Kate, but a lot of people actually asked a similar question. What about alternative ways of pitching? Notion pages, some kind of like cool new deck startup, old school executive summary PDF. What do you think?
That is a great question. And I'm seeing this trend quite a bit which is instead of like a pitch deck, I get like a Notion deal memo. So the lazy VC in me is like very excited about this. I'm just like, oh, this is great because if I invest in founder Mike, I'm just gonna copy and paste and then like put it in my own Google Doc, and then it's my deal memos done. like you guys have done the work for me. Deal memos, by the way, are a very important part of the discipline of VC, of being able to document the reasons why you invested and also trying to outline the perceived risks of business, right? So when someone does most of the work for me, it's really great. That's part one. Part two, though, is this, which is I still think that going through the presentation, building a slide presentation is an important exercise for a number of reasons. One is that it's still the preferred norm within the VC industry and investment industry is to see a deck. So as cool as Notion and stuff is, maybe that's like a supplement to a really, really great pitch deck. I think part two is this, which is, this exercise that we went through, I'm going to share my screen one more time to go through like this exercise of just like trying to get through these slide headlines ends up becoming a really, really good practice for the rest of your team. It's unlikely if you have co-founders or other kind of key advisors, teammates, that you're just like constructing your presentation in pure isolation. It's just a good way of trying to align around your story very clearly, right? So if you can get your entire company down to between 5 and 20 bullets, just like this, that again then can be distilled into a presentation format just like this, I think you're going to find that you gain a lot in terms of how you can pitch this presentation, but also those who are participants in your company will also be armed in the key bullets to rely upon to pitch as well, right? So like where fundraising gets really interesting is when like your engineering manager who's not involved in the fundraising process just so happens to be in line at Chipotle with Eric next to him. And he's like, oh, Eric, I see you on Twitter. Well, like if you have a minute between like getting your burrito bowl, like, can I just tell you a little bit about what I'm up to? Goes back into her mind and then like thinks about like the exercise that she went through and helping to like refine your pitch headlines. She can now advocate on your behalf too. So I think it's a wonderful exercise to just go through this. I do like burrito bowls, by the way. I ate one yesterday.
Sounds great. And just to wrap things up, we will be sharing a recording of this. So please follow us on Twitter and the rest of the social channels to get a recap of all of Eric's excellent advice.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we're pretty much at time here, Mike. So again, a huge thank you to everyone who was able to join us, spend your morning or your evening with us to talk about pitch headlines. If you want to find more content on pitching, constructing pitch decks, just the art of fundraising, go to YouTube. So you can go to YouTube right now. I think /Hustle Fund. I think we got that domain now. Yeah, we do. YouTube.com/Hustle Fund. And then you can search around. We have a lot of content here around raising capital that I hope you can check out. And then finally, a big thank you to our awesome sponsors at NetSuite for allowing the session to happen. We have a full recording that we're going to publish hopefully in the next day or so. We're going to snip out like 6 or 7-ish small 30-second clips too that we'll share on social media as well that we think are some of the best parts of today's session. So thank you all very much and wishing you all well. Stay safe.